So what's Magnus Carlsen getting up to in 2019? Well, his next tournament is going to be the Grenka Chess Classic, which takes place in the second half of April. But actually he's got nothing in his calendar between now and then, which must be a bit frustrating for him after his victory in the Tata Steel tournament. However, he does seem to have the bug for chess at the moment, as he's been playing online in the Lichess Titled Arena, and he racked up another victory at the beginning of February. And I'd like to show you, well, a couple of games from that online session he had. I'll show you one game now and another game in another video. Remember, if you're not a subscriber to this channel, then do click on the subscribe button there. It's free to subscribe, and of course if you click the bell you get instant notification when we post a new video. Let's have a look at a couple of these games. So first of all, this one, I should mention that it's bullet chess, 1 minute for all the moves. So that's a very different kind of chess to classical chess, obviously. It involves a special kind of technique, not just chess technique, but a special kind of mouse technique actually as well. Make sure you don't lose on time. And we can see that Magnus has changed his handle from Dr. DrNykterstein to Dr. Nykterstein. Now, I'm sure your knowledge of the Norwegian language is good enough to know that nykter means sober in Norwegian. So it seems to me another typical Magnus joke. He has a teasing sense of humour. He's gone from Drunkenstein to Soberstein, basically. So does that mean he's given up alcohol? Well, only he can tell us. So he's white and he's playing against Sergei Klimenko, who it says is an IM. And it's c5. Now this doesn't have a very good reputation. This is a kind of Czech Benoni, but a Czech Benoni where white hasn't played the pawn to c4. And I think the Czech Benoni is pretty dodgy at the best of times, but this is definitely not a good system for black, because white is able to use that c4 square for a knight to get at that weak pawn on d6. So, well, when you're playing any kind of chess, but especially bullet chess, you want a clear plan. And white definitely has a very clear plan in this position. So does black at the moment. So he's exchanging off this dark squared bishop, the so-called bad bishop. Problem is it makes this pawn even weaker. I just think this is a very dubious system for black actually. And white is even able to get in tempo. I guess if black wanted to go a bit crazy here and introduce some complications, well, this is one way to do it. I don't think this is bad in any way for white. Another good move is to play here and then take on g7. Well, it would just be a bit more random. Probably still very, very good for white actually. So the queen prudently went back to d8, and now Magnus started this typical journey, as I mentioned before, and this is simply very, very good for white. And now, of course, knight c4 is possible, but Magnus played a very positional move actually, doing as black did, exchanging off this, well, so-called bad bishop. He doesn't need to do this. You know, in a sense, by exchanging pieces, it eases the congestion in black's position actually. However, it's still very, very good for white. And he gets in knight c4. And typically a4, just to make sure that this knight isn't going to be forced out of the way with b5, and also gaining some nice space on the queen side. And knight b5 might come at some point, although black can defend at the moment with knight c8. So black plays a6, but this is, well, it's a pretty ugly move. Because white can clamp the queenside with a5. This is a horrible position for black. Don't play this opening, folks. It's not a good idea. f5. So the typical break, f5. And here is a really crucial moment where white has to select a plan. Do you leave that pawn on e4? Do you exchange? Do you push on with a5? Well, Magnus did something very different. I think this is a really interesting moment in the game. I think white, all these options are good for white. You could exchange here and just plant that knight on e4. Beautiful position for white. Both knights superbly placed. You could also play a5 to secure the b6 square. Although, okay, you have to contend with some kind of counterattack here, but this must be good for white. But no, Magnus didn't want that. He wanted to take the fight to his opponent straight away, and f4 certainly does that. I mean, this just wrecks black's centre, and I think, in bullet chess especially, the initiative is everything. The initiative and a clear plan. So f4 just steams through the middle of the board. Taking and e5, there we go. And particularly when black is so poorly developed, this is an extremely dangerous plan. Actually, I think, if black played ultra correctly here, it might not be so bad for black. But in practice, this is just so powerful. And here Magnus decided just to take on e5. Very sensible. So he's steamed through the middle of the board. He's got a powerful pass pawn on d6. And here he could sweep up the pawn on c5. Instead, just takes on f4. And the queen defends the pawn on d6. Now, knight d4. So black is counterattacking. That knight might be annoying, but the rook sweeps across. Well, this is just straight on for white. So Magnus wants to just slam the rook down on e7, and it looks very, very powerful. In fact, I mean, in a sense, it's pointless to analyse these bullet games too deeply. But I should point out that black can play rook f6 here, and that collects the d pawn. The thing is, rook f6 when you have to move almost instantly is not a very natural move, considering the weakness of the back rank. Rook f6, you have to be absolutely sure you're going to get that pawn and absolutely sure your king isn't in trouble. I mean, I would still fancy white to win this position, actually, because the rook is so active on b7. The king is very poorly placed on the back rank. But anyway, black should be fine here, but it's another matter. b5 played, and now after this move, it's straight ahead for white. Knight d5, covering f6, so rook f6 not possible, and looking at some beautiful squares here, so it really restricts black, and black is dead now. Knight takes pawn, rook e7. Now the troops are coming in, so basically black missed one chance in this game. He only had one chance, and after that it's straight on for white. And Magnus finished the game very efficiently and brutally with this move, queen e5. Threatening mate, that was defended, and now knight f6. If that's taken, then obviously mate in 2. Let's go back. The knight came back to attack the queen, and it's checkmate here. Queen h7 threatened, and well, it doesn't make any difference if this pawn takes here, it's mate. If pawn here, then rook takes his mate, and in the game, knight takes rook, queen h7 is mate. Brutal finish from Magnus Carlsen, and well, I just think for a bullet game that is pretty impressive. You know, there wasn't any hesitation there at all with his plans. Clear plans, typical Carlsen, clear plans, and no prevarication at all. Yeah, absolutely brutal. So there we go. Dr. Nykterstein comes through in that game beautifully. In the next video, I'll show you another game from Carlsen, which shows a very different kind of technique actually, but fascinating all the same. Hope you enjoyed that. If you want to subscribe to the channel, as I mentioned, do click on the button below, and if you want to support us, then you can support us on Patreon or PayPal. You can see the links down there. And do check out the Magnus Carlsen playlist as well. You'll see that in the info tab, but also in the video description down there as well. I hope I'm pointing in the right direction. I never know, really. Thanks for watching.